Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to rise on behalf of the people of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Recently, I rose during question period on behalf of Bonnie, a constituent who lives in a remote part of my riding. Bonnie and her husband are seniors living on a fixed income of $25,000 a year. Bonnie had just learned her oil bill this winter will be over $2,000, almost triple last year. So I asked the government why they weren't cutting the taxes fueling energy inflation. As is often the case in this House, when asked about taxes or inflation, the government's only answer is climate change, which confirms what the Conservatives have been saying for years. The carbon tax is not an environmental policy, it's a tax policy. But that wasn't all the minister said in response to Bonnie's predicament. The minister said higher energy prices were needed to address the existential threat to humanity. This belief in a climate apocalypse is a dangerous delusion. It's one thing for juvenile delinquents to throw food at priceless works of art and justify their actions with climate change, but it's another when a government itself is delusional. This should terrify Canadians like Bonnie. The Liberals have already declared their ends justify any means when it came to the Freedom Convoy. If this government truly believes its carbon tax is saving the world, saving humanity, well then what's it to them if senior citizens freeze to death this winter? Of course, the carbon tax saving the world is nonsense. Humanity has witnessed sea levels rise by hundreds of meters. Our forebears spread to every corner of the world using stone tools. Yet somehow this government believes a 2-meter change in sea level over 60 years spells the extinction of the human race. Emissions reductions require thoughtful policy that balances the interests of post-industrial economics, industrial economies, and developing economies. Conservatives have argued that Canada, having a small size, we can maximize our efforts by focusing on replacing coal with natural gas. And Canada can lead developing new technologies such as carbon capture and small modular reactors. The best part of those policies is it doesn't leave people like Bonnie freezing over the winter. The problem with calling it a climate emergency is that it can be used to feed greed through a carbon tax. We saw how this government crushed civil liberties such as the right to due process when it declared a public order emergency because of illegally parked trucks. What rights are they willing to lock down to stop their climate emergency fantasy? History is full of examples of good, decent people doing horrible things because the end was near. Our culture has even had an expression for those people. We say they drank the Kool-Aid. Well, this government has been binge drinking the green Kool-Aid. They have embraced the myth of climate change apocalypse with a cult-like zealotry. It's this type of extremism driving the polarization in our country. If you don't sign on to the leftist narrative, you're attacked as a denier and a conspiracist. It doesn't matter if you believe climate change is measured in millions of years. It doesn't matter if you support reducing global emissions. If you don't support making energy unaffordable for the most vulnerable, you're shunned by the cult. Through you, Madam Speaker, does the government's parliamentary secretary agree with the minister that climate change will lead to the extinction of the human race? And if she really believes that, can she tell us exactly how many seniors they're willing to see freeze to death this winter?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to address the issue of inflation because the elevated inflation Canada is experiencing now, and frankly in the rest of the world, is a major issue for all Canadians. We do understand that Canadians continue to experience higher costs of living and that many are struggling to make ends meet. However, it is important to remember that inflation is a global phenomenon. It's a lingering result of the COVID pandemic that's been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine and by the snarled supply chains that are affecting people and businesses around the world. And while Canada's inflation rate is less severe, 6.9%, than that of many of our peers, like the United States, 8.2%, the United Kingdom, 10.1%, and Germany, 10%, we appreciate that this will continue to be a difficult time for a lot of Canadians. While it's not a made-in-Canada problem, we do have a made-in-Canada solution to help those that need it the most. we're moving forward with our affordability plan, which includes targeted measures worth $12.1 billion. For example, Madam Speaker, now that Bill C-30 has received royal assent, individuals and families receiving the GST credit will receive an additional support starting actually this week. And with Bill C-31, we are proposing to create the Canada Dental Benefit for children under 12 in families with annual incomes under $90,000 who do not have access to a private dental plan. I am confident that the member from Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke can appreciate the positive impacts our affordability measures are having on her constituents. And I would like to remember the House that all of these support measures are targeted and fiscally responsible. Now is not a time to pour unnecessarily fuel on the flames of inflation. Now, when it comes to pollution pricing, we know that a national price on pollution is the most effective and least costly way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that's why we moved forward with this system. Climate action is no longer a theoretical political debate. The reality is that it is an economic necessity. Most provinces have their own pollution pricing mechanisms. In the provinces where the federal backstop had to be applied, families get payments to offset the cost of the federal pollution pricing. And the reality is, most households are getting back more than they pay. Indeed, in the 4 provinces where the federal system applies, the climate action incentive payments means that a family of 4 will receive $745 in Ontario, $832 in Manitoba, $1,101 in Saskatchewan, and $1,079 in Alberta. In addition, families in rural and small communities, like those living in Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, are eligible to receive an extra 10%. This is putting more money back in the pockets of Canadians. Madam Speaker, this is important work, but I want to also highlight it is not the entire climate plan. It is one of the tools in the toolbox, and we are working hard on affordability and at the same time addressing climate change. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, every cult needs a chorus, and it's such an irony that the Liberals would offer the line price on pollution. According to this climate cult, every word the Parliamentary Secretary just said was pollution. Nobody looks to a cult for consistency. If this government really thought carbon dioxide was pollution, it would never utter another word. Of course, cult leaders never hold themselves to the same standard they set for their followers. It's why this Prime Minister can fly to Tofino for a one-day vacation. It's the same climate hypocrisy which galls Canadians. In one carbon-spewing breath, they call it an existential threat. Then they'll turn around and fly hundreds of envirocrats and groupies to the next COP meeting at a human rights violating state. Can this parliamentary secretary tell us what number of climate cultists will we be paying to fly to Egypt's resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh to attend COP27 this year?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'm sure that most Canadians agree that taking action on climate change is important, not only from an environmental perspective, but as an economic necessity. However, if we're talking about economics too and affordability, there are good reasons for Canadians to be confident. Canada's already supporting those who need it the most with our affordability plan at the moment that they need it the most. And tomorrow afternoon, Madam Speaker, our colleague, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, will present the fall economic statement, which will lay out some of the steps our government will take towards a brighter future for our country. Looking forward to that presentation tomorrow. Thank you, Madam Speaker.